All right. And again, good morning. It is Monday, August 29th. I am Ariel Shaw, founder and president of Southern Crescent Women in Business. Today, we are hosting a women-owned certification training and more with Ms. Terry Dennison and the U.S. Small Business Administration. We will also cover federal contracting set-asides and also access to capital. I am Ariel Shaw. I'm founder of multiple businesses. We have an extensive background in politics and government and a host of things. I'm not going to read my bio, but you can look me up. I am the founder and president of Southern Crescent Women in Business. We are a conglomerate of women-owned businesses and women in business in what we call the Southern Crescent or South Metro Atlanta. We cover Henry County, Clayton County, DeKalb County, Fayette County, and more. Our mission for Southern Crescent Women in Business is simple. We must unequivocally foster business relationships to help sustain and grow our business and local economies. Our vision is to deepen and develop key partnerships and business relationships to provide the resources to assist our women-owned businesses, which is, if you are on our mailing list, you would have gotten notification that we just went into a formal agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration. That's an example of us deepening and developing relationships with key resource partners to assist women in business, and that is what you have today. Today we have Ms. Terry Dennison. She is the Georgia District Director for the U.S. Small Business Administration, which she's been in this role since 2002. Terry began her career in 1987 as a Presidential Management Fellow at the agency's DC District and Headquarter offices. And Terry has been recognized by ABL, Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Georgia Micro Enterprise Network, and a host of other entities. So we are happy to have Terry, and Terry is actually going to tell us a little bit more. What I find really alarming is a lot of people still don't know what SBA is and what they do. So I'm actually going to turn this over to Terry so that she could give you a little background on what is SBA, and let you know, as a woman-owned business, what opportunities exist for you.
Good morning, everyone. I trust that you can hear me okay? Still? Good. So let me bring my PowerPoint up here. Get us started. I need to get to put that down for a second. Yes. There you go. I'll put Ariel and I in the corner there. So today, of course, the focus is on the Federal Women-Owned Small Business Contracting Program, but I would like to start off, because Ariel pointed out, and I think it's a great idea, to talk about first and foremost the U.S. Small Business Administration, or SBA, and who we are. We are a federal government agency because a lot of time people will mistakenly call us the Small Business Association and think we're a nonprofit organization. We are part of the federal government. We're what they call an independent agency, which means simply that we report directly to the White House. We're not part of a department like Department of Labor or HUD or Defense, et cetera. We have probably one of the most extensive field structures in the federal government. We have 68 district offices across the country and in the U.S. territories. The Georgia District Office is based here in Atlanta, but we are charged with covering and overseeing the program delivery and operations of SBA's programs and resources across all 159 counties of the state of Georgia. And just to give you a little idea of the team with which we do that, we have a total of 12 employees, including myself and our deputy, that cover lender relations, outreach, and then our government contracting certification programs. And in a nutshell, and I always say that because I think, as I mentioned the other day, Ariel, the official language in the Small Business Act, as far as SBA's mission, is like 3 paragraphs long and a lot of wherefores and therefores. But very simply put, our mission is to help small businesses start, grow, expand. And in the case when there is some type of disaster, help those businesses to recover. I would also point out, just in terms of kind of where our core offerings are, we call them the 3 C's and a D. And so that would be capital access, counseling and education, and contracting assistance, particularly in terms of federal contracting. As far as the capital access goes, we primarily guarantee loans made by either private commercial lenders or nonprofit lenders such as community development financial institutions. Depending on the type of program, those loans can be up to $5 million with the SBA guarantee. We also support micro lending with community development financial institutions, and those loans go up to $50,000, and of course are designed to help micro enterprises who may not need a lot of money, but they need what they need to operate. And sometimes it's just a few $1,000s. Banks tend not to want to provide that just because the numbers, the size just doesn't work for them as far as their revenue model and profit model. So nonprofit lenders take that space, and we work with them on delivering that microloan program. Also, like for construction companies, we do offer surety bond guarantees. It's not commercial bonds, but for specific contracts with a definitive period and a definitive deliverable within a period of time, we do offer bonds for bids, because especially in the federal government and even state and local governments, a lot of time require surety bond for you to even submit a bid. If you win that contract, you have to have a performance and or payment bond in case something goes wrong, and we can help small contractors, construction companies and related companies access that surety bonding and actually have a greater bonding capacity. Counseling and training, we work with a lot of different entities to provide that, some of which you may have heard of. Our Small Business Development Center partners, we work with the University of Georgia, and they have 18 locations around the state, 6 in Metro Atlanta, to provide that free counseling and also to provide training for anything from, I got a business idea, is this something that is marketable, to maybe an existing business that is looking to expand or maybe have encountered some of the challenges with growth. And they can actually receive training as well as counseling on that. SCORE is our volunteer partner, does similar the same thing. Retired business people, but also existing business people sharing their actual business expertise. And then we have women business centers that provide that as well. And in the government contracting space, and of course, that's where we're going to spend most of our time today, we oversee several certifications, such as the Women-Owned Small Business Certification, Hub Zones, Historically Underutilized Business Zones Certification Program, and then the 8A Business Development Program, which is probably our oldest government contracting assistance. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. And with that, now we'll shift our focus a little more on the Women-Owned Small Business Federal Certification Program. I see you're trying to move. Oh, there we go. So what is it? The survey. Okay, so this is really kind of the roadmap for today's presentation. I always like to start with the why. Why are we having this conversation about the WSB certification? And for that matter, that can extend to any type of either federal contracting certification or state and local, or certification in the context of corporate buying. A lot of time people would like to, I want to just get these certifications because they're there to have, but they really don't think about it in the context of, is this government entity buying what I'm selling? Is government contracting, be it federal, state, local government, corporate buying, contracting, do these fit into my business model and where I want to take the business? And those are some of the things you need to think of first. So that's why I always like to start with, why are we doing this? And then talk a little bit about the certifications eligibility. What does it take to qualify as a women-owned small business for the WSB federal contracting program? Talk a little bit about the process itself, and then also how that certification is used in actually doing government work and acquiring government work. And then kind of wrap up with some of the things that have to be done in order to maintain the eligibility and the recertification process. Because basically you have an initial certification and then every 3 years you have to recertify. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so why? Why are we doing this? Well, first of all, I'd like to start off by kind of distinguishing a little bit or talking a little bit about two terms that we often hear when it comes to women-owned businesses and contracting. You hear about women-owned small business, WSB, or some people actually pronounce it WOSB, make a word out of it. You'll hear all three of those. And then you'll also hear about, a lot of times, Women Business Enterprises, or WBE certification. So there are, of course, a lot of similarities between the two, but there are some other distinctions. So I just wanted to take a second to talk about that. In terms of the primary contracting entity, where and how these might come up, the WSB certification is a creation of the federal government. It is a federal program that's been created in federal statute and regulations. And so that's the primary context, or the primary entity with which you'd hear WOSB. The Women Business Enterprise, or WBE, you may hear that more often in terms of state and local government contracting and with corporations. I do have a footnote there that sometimes, a lot of times, and more non-federal entities may elect to accept the WOSB certification because they're like, okay, we don't have a lot of staff, we want to streamline things. So if that certification and that criteria helps us meet our goals, we'll just accept that. So when in doubt, just ask them if they accept the WOSB certification of the federal government, or do you actually have to do some other process for their purposes. As far as business size, as far as, in terms of the term WOSB, in the SB part is small business. So of course, with a Small Business Administration, so the women-owned business has to be small in accordance with our size standards. And roughly, basically what we mean by size standard is we have industry classifications. You may be familiar with NAICS codes, North American Industry Classification System codes. And basically it's a six-digit number that represents a specific industry or business activity. And the Small Business Administration actually has established size standards for each one of those. There's probably like 750, 780 plus NAICS codes. Either the size is based on 5-year average revenues. It used to be 3 years, but that changed about 3.5 years ago. So it's a 5-year average in revenues. Or it could be number of employees, which now is a 24-month average, not 12 as it had been previously. And that's a very recent change. So of course you got to be small with us and the federal WOSB. With WBE, there may or may not be size limits. It really depends on how that entity is defining women business enterprise. A lot of times they really just focus on, is it majority owned and controlled by one or more women entrepreneurs, and they don't necessarily care about size. And then the third thing is that the contracting activity. Yes.
Can I jump in here for 1 second?
Sure.
Just so we're clear. So SBA standard size is 500 employees or less, typically.
That is the short marketing answer.
Yeah.
Concise answer.
Right.
When it gets to specific programs, and particularly when it comes to federal contracting, that's when you get a little more detail based on the NAICS code classification of the business or the contracting opportunity.
Absolutely. And just so we're clear, so when, and I'm sure Terry may hit on this, but when we say women owned, so I know some ladies have businesses with their husbands, you have to be 51%. And typically that's outlined in what you call your operating agreement. So if you have at least 51% ownership in the business, then you are then classified by federal standards as a woman-owned business. So go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, and we are going to touch on that here in a little bit. And then finally, in terms of the contracting activity, when it comes to WOSB and the federal government, and I will be talking about this, the WOSB set aside or preferences are limited to certain designated NAICS codes. And those are codes or industries where women have been underrepresented in terms of contracting dollars going to those businesses. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. With the WBE, generally there's no industry restriction, either on the business or on the contracting opportunity. Once again, they're probably just more focused on, is the company majority owned and controlled by one or more women. Okay. And this is another point that a lot of times people miss in terms of why we have certifications. Once again, I'm going back to the federal procurement. We have, of course, a 23% federal government-wide goal in terms of contracting dollars going to small businesses. In addition to that goal, we have what we call our socioeconomic categories, which are listed here. And of course, at the top of the list, I put here women-owned small businesses. There is a federal government-wide annual goal of 5%. That is 5% of federal contracting dollars go to women-owned small businesses. And then just for discussion purposes, these are the other categories as well: small disadvantaged business, which include our 8A programs, Hub Zone, and service disabled veteran-owned small business. And those percentages represent the percentage of federal spending dollars that go to these categories. So for each one of these, there is a corresponding status or certification. And really, in this, what this does is basically say federal government agencies are looking for, they have a goal for women-owned small business expenses or expenditures. How do I know that I'm meeting that goal? The certification really kind of comes from the other side and says, okay, I'm a business that is WOSB or women-owned small business. I meet the criteria, therefore you can count any spending with me towards your 5% goal. So that's the connection, but really between the goals and the certifications. Okay. A little footnote here, and I wasn't sure because someone else prepared this presentation, most of it, but I think it is an important little nugget in terms of small business contracting. A lot of time people are thinking larger contracts, the $1 million, the several $1 million contract or $500,000 contract. Contracting opportunities exist across a spectrum in the federal government. And that's probably true of state and local government as well, or even corporate. something to keep in mind that between the micro enterprise or micro purchase level, which has been raised, it was 3,500 forever, and they finally raised it to 10,000, up to what we call the simplified acquisition threshold, which is 250,000. That automatically is reserved for small business. Okay, and they're also counting the socioeconomic activity as well. So if you're a WOSB or a small disadvantaged business, et cetera, they're counting those purchases towards it as well. But this is a lower, I guess, relatively speaking, in some ways, a lower threshold. For micro purchases, basically, you simply need to be able to accept a credit card, because especially at the local level, like say our office, we need supplies. Sometimes there are services that we need. And as long as it's below that micro purchase threshold, my admin officer can purchase that. So you don't have any bids to worry about or any more complicated paperwork. It's simply commercial transaction. So if you don't take credit cards and you're thinking about getting into this space, you might want to have as a goal to work towards being able to accept credit cards. Then you could take advantage of these micro purchases. And this time of year especially, got a lot of that going on. We're in our fourth quarter, and that's when what I think it's about 35 to 40% of federal spending occurs in our last quarter, because we realize, oh, we got the money, but we got to use it by September 30th. And a lot of times it's done, micro purchasing is a way that is expedited at the end of the fiscal year.
That's why I wanted to make sure, and I'm so glad you hit on that, Terry, because it was in my notes. So why are we hosting this training and why now? Because according to the calendar year, the fiscal year for federal, meaning they're not a January 1 through December 31st calendar. They operate where their fiscal year ends September 30th. And their new fiscal year starts October 1, which means what? It means that if you have certain certifications and you have a whole bunch of entities that are looking, how can I spend these dollars so I can position myself for the next budget? So I can say I've met my goals. So I can say I've spent dollars with a woman-owned business and a small business. This is why it's so important that we're having this conversation now. So if you've never attended any federal contracting classes, some of these terms may be a little different for you, especially like HubZone and NAICS code. But I encourage you to get plugged in, because again, this is that time frame. So thank you, Terry, for hitting that. And again, you don't even have to go for bids when you're looking at some of these smaller amounts, as Terry has mentioned, but they're available. So and just so we're 100% clear, the government is the biggest buyer. I don't think we said that. No. I want to make sure we clarify that they purchase everything. Okay.
Yeah, any given year. In fact, I think for fiscal year 21, we just got those numbers out. Final numbers. I think last month, but this past fiscal year it was like $566 billion of goods and services that were purchased. And any given year, you're looking at $500 billion, give or take 100 billion. That is spent. So yes, we are the world's largest customer. The other piece there in the footnote, the simplified acquisition threshold, if you are not familiar, and I'll show you where it is here later, at sam.gov, it now has as one of its items the federal business opportunities, Fed Biz Ops. You know, they were different websites, and now they're beginning to consolidate a lot of them into sam.gov, which is a good thing. If it's over 25,000 up to that 250, they have to publish. They have to publish it, or actually anything over 25,000, they have to publish. But for the simplified acquisition threshold, 25,000 to 250 has to be published. as you get to work with, I guess, some of the end users and buyers, each agency may have a way that it publicizes its SAP, Simplified Acquisition Program, or SAC, Simplified Acquisition Threshold purchases. Sometimes they have an internal bulletin board where those are posted. Since they're not required to post them in Fed Biz Ops, they do post them somewhere. So just a couple of things to keep in mind in terms of some lower entry effort ways to get into federal spending. And so basically the Women's Owned Small Business Federal Contracting Program, we've kind of hit on these. Takeaways there is, one, it allows you to take advantage of annual prime contracting goals that agencies have. They need to meet those goals. You can help them meet those goals with the actual certification. It's an avenue to build capacity and grow your business by creating another or accessing another revenue stream. And then access to set-asides for specifically women-owned small business. And there's another term that we'll be talking about, economically disadvantaged women-owned small business. And I'll be explaining why that distinction is important and something that you can leverage for your benefit. Also, in terms of part of the why, I just want to make sure I like to share contracting numbers to kind of keep it real. And so, as I mentioned, we did get the final figures for fiscal year 21 last year. And so in terms of WOSB prime contracting, and this is at the nationally across the federal government, basically $25 billion, okay, which was about 4.63% of the total federal dollars spent. So didn't quite meet that 5% goal, but came pretty close. In other years, we have actually met it. We had a number of contracts, almost 128,000. And in terms of number of vendors, and these are prime vendors where the entity that actually had the government contract, it doesn't include subcontracting, people who are contracting with primes. We were a little over 13,000. And in terms of the top industry groups, and these are kind of the broad categories of NAICS classifications, just to kind of give you an idea of what that looked like. The top 14 billion was your professional, scientific, and technical services, which includes a lot of your professional services, construction, which traditionally has not been a woman heavy industry, but that is changing. Manufacturing, administrative, and support, and waste management, and why they put those all together, I have no idea. And then healthcare and social assistance. And of course, everything else would be other industry groups, but those are the top 5.
Terry, do we have the correlating NAICS code? Because I think professional should be the 541611. I know a little bit has changed. Do we have those correlating NAICS codes or no?
I don't have them handy, but
okay.
Actually, I will have, I do have a document which I'm gonna be sending you some documents that I'm referring to so that you can share them.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely need those 13 NAICS.
Yeah. Yeah. But we can, and yeah, I think the document I have actually gives you kind of that broad category and then all the 6-digit NAICS codes that come under it. Okay. But in terms of, these are, of course, department level contract dollars. So surprise, right? The top, of course, is Department of Defense because they have lots of money and they do a lot of spending. Followed by HHS, Health and Human Services, Department of Homeland Security, GSA, and then USDA. And of course, under each of these are in these departments, you have agencies and bureaus and other subdivisions of it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about research and how you can kind of figure some of these things out too, or where to go to get help with doing your market research. Don't have the full complement for Georgia, but in terms of total dollars last year, and these are Georgia-based firms that did federal work, wherever, but they're based in Georgia. And that's important because we want to focus on Georgia-based businesses because that money's coming back, as opposed to work that's in Georgia that anybody can do, and those dollars may not necessarily stay with us. But in fiscal year 21, what, 617, almost $618 million. And that was actually about a little over 12% of the total federal dollars that went to Georgia businesses as contractors. So we actually did better than the 5% goal in Georgia, even though nationally that 5% goal wasn't met. Little over, let's see, 2,948 contracts, and that was with 426 vendors, unique vendors. So just kind of give you a little bit of info, and then we'll have to do a little more drilling down to come up with some of the other figures like the industry breakdown and agency breakdown to see if it's similar to the national. But I thought that was important to point out as well. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about eligibility. Before I get to like the mechanics of the WOSB certification, once again, I always like to start with, your business and what you sell and provide, and if you have a connection with the federal marketplace with that. So the number one question that people should ask before they even start looking at going after certifications: does the government buy what you sell? Now, as we mentioned, government does buy a lot of things in terms of goods and services, but still you want to know, not only is the government buying it, but the quantities in which it buys it, who buys it. Because the federal government, once again, is not just one big entity. It's made up of departments and independent agencies such as SBA, bureaus, divisions. If DOD, you got specific military installations. So knowing where in the federal government your good or service that you offer is being purchased, in what quantities, how frequently, is it routinely, or is it, once every 5 years we purchase it? And that's all important because this will help you decide if the activity or the buying activity of the federal government for what you're selling is enough to warrant you going after, getting the certifications, making any other adjustments in your operations to facilitate you doing business with the government. It's like everything else in business. Pros and cons, cost versus benefit. So those are some of the questions you need to ask before we even get into, should I go after 8A or women-owned small business certification, et cetera. And then basically, do you have federal contracting relatable experience? Obviously, if you're new to federal contracting, you may not necessarily have obviously you haven't done an actual contract, but do you have experience that can be translated to doing work on federal contracts? Having, of course, the cash, maybe lines of credit that allow you to start work before the government pays you for work done up to a certain point, et cetera. And then, are you positioned to fulfill a government contract? Once again, do you have the staffing needed, or do you have the resources needed as far as financial resources or the technical capability or capacity to do that work at that level? And more importantly, where do you find contracting opportunities? And we will talk about that. I've already mentioned it, Federal Business Opportunities, or FBO, which is at sam.gov. And then there's a couple other places too. Okay, so are you a small business? Once again, WOSB, you got to be a small business. And we've really talked about this, that your standards, depending on your NAICS industry codes, it doesn't really matter. A lot of time people say, well, do I have to be a certain legal structure to be considered a small business? Basically, all of them, even sole proprietor could do work with the federal government, partnership corporations, LLCs. Operates primarily within the U.S. And we talked about kind of the basis for this, the size determination, either average receipts for 5 years or average number of employees, depending on the NAICS code and the size standard for 24 months. Your operations based primarily in the U.S. And then in terms of other, and I actually cleared this up a little bit because it made it sound a little more absolute than what it is. For the discussion of small business for contracting, there isn't really size standards for nonprofits. That doesn't mean that nonprofits can't do government contracting. It's just that they wouldn't be eligible for a small business related contracting opportunity. Small business, small disadvantaged business, hub zone, women-owned small business, service disabled, veteran-owned small business. But you have other types of entities that do government contracting all the time. You have colleges and universities. You have other nonprofit entities who receive contracts or grants. So that's not to say there isn't space for nonprofits in government contracting, just for this specific conversation. When it comes to small business contracting, there isn't a size. The size standards do not apply to nonprofits. So I wanted to clarify that because they just said they're not eligible, and that was a little misleading. Okay, so eligibility criteria for WOSB. As we mentioned, it has to be at least 51% ownership by one or more women-owned businesses. And that ownership has to be unconditional. It can't be predicated on something happening or not happening. It has to be outright, you own 51% of the shares or 51% of the interest or more. A lot of times, of course, women own the entire thing and that doesn't become an issue. But if you have males as part of the company, then some of these other elements in terms of majority ownership, control, et cetera, become more relevant. Okay, so you got the 51% ownership requirement. Also, the women have to be U.S. citizens, and that's true of all the contracting, small business contracting. Got to be a U.S. citizen. Could be naturalized citizen, but you have to be a U.S. citizen, legal permanent resident, or some other legal immigration status is not going to satisfy that. They have to be the highest officer position. So they have to be the CEO or president. And of course, in your bylaws or your operating agreement, it will define the roles of these various offices. So it needs to be president or the CEO, depending on how you define those positions in your governing documents. Also, in most cases, that person should be the highest compensated in the company. If you have, others that are part of the ownership and management structure, they should be. That can be waived sometimes, and you would have to explain why you're not. But the starting point is that you would be. And proper NAICS codes, and that gets into, which I think will be in the next couple slides, about the NAICS codes and which ones are eligible to be used with the WOSB certifications. So you have to have those in your primary NAICS code or in your offerings in terms of your activities in the NAICS codes that you have. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And let me move this up because I'm covering my slide. Managerial experience, the individuals upon whom eligibility is based, women, one or more women, have to have either the managerial or technical experience in that particular industry. Once again, that goes to control, and that becomes more relevant if you have a mixed leadership of the company or management team or officers. If you own 100%, then that's not as big a deal. And of course, managing the day-to-day operations of the company, you're the final say on decisions that are made that influence the direction of the company. And that a lot of time is reflected in your legal documentation, your corporate bylaws or your operating agreement if you're an LLC. Now, unlike, if you're familiar with the 8A business development program, you might have heard, or if we have anybody who's in the program currently, there's a minimum requirement, a minimum 2-year requirement for being in business. That can be waived, but that's the starting point. And that's because the program is really designed to be a business development program, which utilizes government contracting as a vehicle for that. With this certification, there is no minimum time in business. Okay. The contracting officer would have to decide that you have the capability to perform on the contract. With SBA and the 8A program, SBA is basically saying this company has the ability to perform the contract. If they wanted to say do a sole source contracting award directly without competition, we have to kind of vouch for that company. So that's where that 2-year in business and potential for success criteria comes in with that program. You don't have that with WOSB. Basically we're looking at ownership and control. And when it comes to an actual contract, it's the contracting officer is going to make that determination. So that's why we don't have a minimum time in business from an eligibility standpoint. Now, of course, practically speaking, you're going to want to have some kind of track record or traction before you go into federal contract. My personal opinion, you create a business and you have core activities that you base that business on, and you start it and you grow it. And now maybe you're ready to kind of take your business to the next level or say, okay, what new avenue, income stream, market segment can I go after to continue to grow the business? Then maybe that's when you look at government contracting. That's just my personal thinking. Very rarely I see it succeed where you start off as a government contractor, unless maybe you worked in that realm in some other capacity, like people that were in the military. Maybe they worked in the contracting office and were contracting officers. Then they leave the military and they start a business. And that does happen. That might be an example of where that would work. But generally speaking, you start the business, whatever core activity, goods or services you're selling, and then you get a track record and some synergy going on that, and then you go into some other types of activities like government contracting. But that's from a practical standpoint. I didn't mention, and this gets a little confusing because you got the WOSB certification, and then you got like 2 subcategories. And one of those subcategories is also WOSB. But then you have EDWSB, or economically disadvantaged women-owned small business. And you're gonna see here shortly why that is important. The criteria for economically disadvantaged is similar to that for the 8A program or small disadvantaged business, or I think even maybe DBE with DOT's program, looking at adjusted personal net worth, 3-year average for personal income, and the fair market value of your assets. And these thresholds are there. Adjusted personal net worth because it's not net worth on its face, assets minus liabilities. They actually take out the equity in your primary residence where you reside. And they also exclude your ownership interest in the business that you're qualifying. They take those 2 things out. And then if the net worth is less than 750 with those adjustments, then you're good as far as the personal net worth test. 3-year average personal income, 350 or less, and then the fair market value at 6 million or less. And if you meet those criteria, which many people do, then you would qualify as EDWSB. So keep that in mind. And then when we get to the contracting, you'll see where that all comes into play. As far as certification, you know, when the WOSB program was first created, it was self-certification, similar to what you do with small business. There is no formal small business certification. You self-certify, you look at our criteria based on your primary NAICS code for your business. You say, okay, I think I fall below that threshold. And then you simply indicate in sam.gov under certifications and representations, where you kind of explain what your business is and all the different categories it falls under or could be classified as. You would indicate I'm a small business. That changed in October 2020. Now you have to be formally certified by SBA. And basically that means you submit an application, SBA approves it. Any self-certifications that existed prior to October 15th or no more. My understanding is when we switched to the formal certification, and once we got past October 15, 2020, about probably only about a third to a half of the previously self-certified companies actually came back in for certification. And I know people sometimes, I know SBA felt a little alarmed by that. I'm not sure if that's a bad thing. You know, in the sense that, okay, maybe they were fudging a little bit. We don't know because it's self-certification. And unless somebody protested the status when a contract was awarded, there was no way to question that. So we'll see. I think those numbers are coming back up, but you have to be formally certified either, and most people prefer to do it through the online certification process that SBA has. It's free. There are, I think, 3 entities now that were approved when this was first established as third-party certifiers, and there is a cost for that. And as I mentioned earlier, self-certification simply does not exist anymore. Okay. So first of all, a couple things. System for Acquisition Management, SAM, and the website is sam.gov. You have to register your business in there. Anybody who's doing business with the federal government need to register in SAM. And that could be for a variety of things, contracting, being able to pursue grants, any type of, if you're going to be doing any type of financial transactions with the federal government, you need to register in sam.gov. The good news is there's not a cost to register in sam.gov. You just simply have to go in and register, fill the information out. I always try to tell people, because I think when you go in and ask, do you want to do this simply for loans and grants or for all purposes? Just go ahead and say for all purposes. Even if you don't use it for a variety of things, it just makes it a lot easier to say, I'm registering for all types of activity. And that way it's already there if things change. And then you would actually submit your application at a website beta.certified.sba.gov, and I will you'll see a screenshot of that. And then once you are certified by SBA as a WOSB or EDWSB, then you can actually represent yourself in SAM as falling under that category, but you can't do it before then. In fact, I think the way it's set up, you have to add some other information so that the system knows that you have been certified by SBA and you're not trying to self-certify yourself. Okay, so that's just a screenshot of beta.certified.sba.gov. It has changed, I think, over the last 6 months or 4 months or so. So this is the current way it looks when you go in. And basically, that's why it's important for you to register in sam.gov, because a lot of the information it will pull from sam.gov to populate the online application. trying to get more efficient and leverage technology better instead of having people key things in multiple places, the same information. Let's start with sam.gov, which requires a lot of details, and those things that we need for our applications, simply pull it over. That's what they've been working towards for the past couple of years. May have a couple glitches still, but I think it's getting much better in doing that. And there's no, if you're familiar with the self-certification, you still had to upload certain documents in this, what they call a repository. If you dealt with WOSB back, 5 years ago, none of that anymore. Everything is done online. There's no, there may be like you upload a resume maybe, but it's just not that much extra uploading of separate documentation. Just simply key it in.
So I'm sorry, Terry.
No problem.
Let me ask you a question now. I'll have to say, I think with small businesses, because they're pretty busy, and just because the hierarchy, which we're not going to really get into today, of how the set-asides have worked in the past, there may have been more of a is this process easier or harder? I think that's probably why you saw a little bit of a lag, because I know several people who just didn't have the time and just really didn't want to go there. But I did have a question. So, and you're talking about not having to upload documents. So typically those documents included your birth certificate, your tax documents, all of that sort of thing. Are you saying now that the process just integrates with directly the IRS or directly with, vital statistics? What are you saying?
No. We haven't gotten that sophisticated. Be nice if we did, but no. There were documents that you had to upload because, and I kind of hate digging up ancient history, because if you weren't involved, then it's like, I don't care. But basically, before, when it was self-certification, it wasn't a complete self-certification like, say, small business self-certification. You still were required to upload certain things about, and I think you had to do birth certificate. You had to, to show like I'm a woman and qualify. You had to upload, if you were going for EDWSB, certain financial documents, tax returns, and those you may still have to, but there's fewer documents, I guess is what the best way to put it, that you have to upload.
Okay. And we're getting
some of those you would key in.
And we're getting ladies saying they have been trying to get certified. They're saying it's difficult. They've uploaded documents and still asking for the same documents. One other person saying they've uploaded the documents. It doesn't let them move on to the next process. So can you guys?
That's good feedback to get.
Yeah, make sure you send us your email so we can follow.
I will definitely do that. And we may have to do something like bring our headquarters folks involved, which I was trying to work on that, to see where exactly those specific issues are.
Oh, wow. Somebody said for a year. Oh my goodness. Okay. So we're going to have to work this out. All right. So go ahead, Terry.
No, but that's good feedback to get. And definitely I'll leave my contact information in the chat. And then maybe we can maybe I can get the program manager in headquarters that oversees the WSB certification. We may need to have a smaller, more hands-on session.
Actually, ladies, go ahead and drop your email addresses in who've had problems. And
I'll put in mine. Okay.
Okay. And Marsha, you said it took 6 months for you.
One thing I do know, and I was going to mention this, that they did go through, I know they were having some staffing challenges a good at least 6 months, 7, 8 months ago. I know they brought on some people to try to address that and to speed up the process, get the process, because really they want to get to the point where it would take from the time you get a complete application, and that's the key, from the time you get a complete application, that's when the clock starts. Okay, from SBA standpoint, they want to get to the point where it would take 90 to 120 days. My understanding, the last time I checked, it was, some people were experiencing, I know, about 5 or 6 months and maybe a little more. That was back at the beginning of the calendar year. But I think they've brought on 3 new people, 3 or 4. So
Okay.
I could definitely run that into chat with the manager, the program manager, to see kind of where they are now in terms of timeframes, and if there are things that they're seeing that specifically that's holding things up that we could work on, if those things do exist from this end, from the applicant's end. It may not, but I can at least get that feedback to see if there are some things they're seeing. Go ahead and put. Okay, now it's telling me that only host and panelists can see if I put something in. Is that correct? I'm gonna try to put my email address and tell me if you see it.
Okay. So, okay, I know where I'm seeing the emails that are coming through. And just so if you can, Terry, I don't know if you're going to get on this. Typically when we do our trainings, we have people do a DUNS number before they go into SAM. Are you
That's
gonna
changed.
touch on that? Okay.
That has changed. And when we'll talk about that too when I get to SAM.gov. But that is a change. In short, the federal government is not really using Dun and Bradstreet DUNS numbering system anymore. SAM, the contractor for SAM.gov, or the owner of SAM.gov, which is GSA, General Services Administration, has contracted with another third party. And what they've done is they've built into SAM.gov registration to get what they call a UEI, unique entity indicator or identifier.
And typically we saw UEIs on the nonprofit side because you need that particular
Well,
number
now they're doing it
for grants.gov.
Yeah. So now they're doing it with the government contracting piece too. And I do know I see one thing in chat about getting, having challenges getting past SAM.gov, and it's probably because of the UEI process, because basically they have to verify the company and know that it is in fact a company before assigning that UEI number. And I do know there have been some challenges there, but I do have a workaround which I can share on that. Or not workaround, but a path for addressing that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I do know that has been an issue even with some of our AE firms getting that UEI. Okay. I'm making a note of that. And I don't know if people saw my email address.
We can
Terry.Dennison@SBA.gov.
I can see it. Yeah.
You can see it. Yeah. Because I don't know if they can see it though, because it's simply saying host and panelists is who can see. Yeah. So she didn't see it. But you can pass that on.
Okay.
For some reason, it's not letting me put chat where everybody can see.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you still need a cage number?
Do you still? I think you do still need to register for a cage number, but that's more in terms of the government contracting piece, not the certification piece.
Mm-hmm. And that's generated when you register in SAM.
Right.
SAM will generate a cage number, and
Yeah.
What is that cage word stand for? What is that? CA? What does that stand for? That's
Brain,
okay.
but there's so many acronyms,
I know.
but it'll come to me in a second and I'll share that. But yeah, but as far as the application process, you don't have to have a case number, but you will need it when it comes time to submit a bid or proposal and be awarded a contract. Okay. Move this over. Oops, just a sec, so I can see my screen. So, beta.certified.sba.gov. One of the important things to look at here is the knowledge base, which is basically where they're trying to put checklists and aids that will help in the application process, and also like frequently asked questions. If you see their training media, they actually have some videos online, narrated videos on the different mechanics of getting things uploaded and going through the online application process. Another tool that we might find interesting too, if you're starting out, is Am I Eligible? If you see at the top menu there. And it's really a questionnaire to get people to think of, to kind of see, am I eligible, or would there be a question about my eligibility, not only on WOSB, but also the other socioeconomic programs, 8A, Hub Zone, et cetera. So that's been put in to try to get people to think through that and look at things before they start going full throttle with putting in an application. And prepare, that's where I think they have the checklist of what you need to gather and kind of go through it in a very systematic way, like as you would be entering it, the information is kind of organized in that way. Because that is, and I know we were talking about that the other day, Ariel, a lot of it is you really need to have everything that you need to put in the application at hand. And that way you can kind of just go through it step by step, and maybe even in one setting. But the key is to have everything organized first, and the checklists are designed to help you do that. Okay, now and we could talk some more about the certification, of course, but the contracting itself. Okay, you get the certification. Okay, how am I going to leverage this to get contracts? And this is where Roseby versus economically disadvantaged Roseby come into play. Okay. If you are EDWSB, and when you apply, I would say 99.8% of the people could qualify as EDWSB. So you might as well go ahead and apply for that status, because if you are EWSB, you're automatically women-owned small business. Okay, and you're going to see in a minute when I show you kind of a sample of the NAICS code list in terms of eligible of NAICS codes that are eligible for WOSB use, where this is important. Women-owned small businesses, which aren't necessarily economically disadvantaged, but they're majority owned and controlled by women, they're not eligible for EDWSB opportunities. Okay, they're restricted to those NAICS codes where there is very substantial underrepresentation by women contractors. For the EDWSB, it's simply women are underrepresented. So when you think about it, it took me a while to kind of think about this, because okay, this is confusing. If you are economically women-owned small business, you don't have the resources of someone who just maybe don't have resource limitations, but it is a woman-owned small business. So the idea is you should have as much access to as much opportunity as possible, the maximum amount of opportunity, whereas women-owned small businesses that don't meet the economic disadvantaged criteria. You know, only in those areas where women are, it's just like almost nothing is happening with women on small business and contracting dollars going to them. The next slide, I believe, it'll make a little more sense. In terms of set asides, you know, contracting officer can decide to set aside a contracting opportunity for women on small business, or EDWSB. And simply what has to happen is they have a reasonable expectation that at least 2 businesses in that category will submit an offer. And that's where their market research come in. So a lot of times they'll do like requests for information or pre-solicitation questionnaires. And a lot of times when people go into federal business opportunities and they see those, they're like, well, I'm not going to bother with that because that's not an actual live request for proposal or quote or bid. So I'm not going to bother with that. But you do need to respond because they're trying to figure out, who's out there? And can I justify setting it aside as opposed to just full and open competition and everybody can submit a bid or proposal, large business, small business, non-disadvantaged business, or do I want to reserve it for a specific category of business? When you respond to those requests for information or marketing questionnaires, it's saying we are here. And if they get back, okay, there's 60 businesses in this next code that are EDWSB, they can justify then setting it aside for that category of small business. When they don't get the responses, then they do whatever they think they want to do or need to do. So moral of the story is respond to those questionnaires, even if it's not an immediate contracting opportunity. And the only other thing, of course, award price has to be fair market price. And that becomes important when we talk about sole source contracting. And sole source contracting, which you can do with this category of business or business opportunities, basically, there's nobody else who can do this work, but I can show as the contracting officer that they have the capability of doing it and they can provide it to me at a fair and reasonable price, even without competition. Then you can make a direct award to those businesses. And normally that would be contracting opportunities up to $4.5 million. You could do sole source. If it's a manufacturing related contract, it could go up to 7.
Just so we're clear, I know you hit on this, but the question came back around. If you are a nonprofit, can you get this designation? We answered in the chat that no, you cannot.
That's correct.
Okay, just so we put that out there, because this is going to be recorded, and everybody they're not going to be able to see the chat. They'll be able to hear us. So just so we're clear, if you are a nonprofit, you are not a business in the sense of a small business as categorized by the U.S. Small Business Administration.
That is correct. Okay. And that just basically said what I just said. Now, next slide. Okay, so this whole next code thing. Okay, and WOSB and EDWSB is different than the other, like say 8A. 8A, there's no limitation on or restrictions on industry codes. You know, contracting officer classifies a business opportunity or contracting opportunity under a certain NAICS code. That 8A firm has that NAICS code either as its primary activity or a secondary activity of its business, and they can come together and the contracting officer will reward it to them. When this program was set up, and I don't want to get into a whole lot of ancient history, but you had some court decisions, basically, that said, if you're going to do something special, i.e. towards women or minority, you have to do a couple things. First of all, there's got to be a compelling public policy reason for doing that, because we have constitutional amendments that say, we're not going to discriminate against people. So is there a compelling public policy reason? Well, you could probably go to statistics, economic statistics showing, wealth gaps, say in this case with women, because of past discrimination, et cetera. So that would be a compelling reason. Then Supreme Court decision said, once you've established that, you got to come up with the most tailored way of addressing those discrepancies. So this program came into being after the court decision was Adirondack versus Pena, which that was the Supreme Court case that said you got to meet these two tests if you're going to do something special based on race or gender. And so that is reflected in how this program was constructed compared to some of the older set aside programs of the federal government. So that's why, SBA does contracts with someone to do a study and look at all the industry classification codes, to look at activity or with women-owned business, and then determine that those where there is either underrepresentation or substantial underrepresentation, those particular NAICS codes or contracting opportunity with those classified under those particular NAICS codes can utilize WSB or EDWSB. And you don't have that anywhere else, but that's kind of the background as to why we have it with this and not with the other certifications. Okay. And I will provide this list. You can pass on, Ariel, of all of the NAICS codes that are eligible for either EDWSB or WSB. So I just took a snapshot of the one dealing with construction, because that's a popular area category, right? So you see it has, some of them have WSB, some of them has EDWSB. And this is where the distinction becomes important.
Absolutely. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So I know we mentioned construction. Somebody's asking about transportation, because this is an area where we are having more women get into that space.
Yeah.
Definitely is changing. We have, it's definitely changing.
Yeah. And they probably are. This is just a snapshot because the list is several pages long. But this is just for an example. This is not the entire universe of NAICS codes applicable to WSB and EDWSB. And I'm quite certain there's some transportation related NAICS codes on the list. I just chose this for example purposes, but it actually does come from the most recent list that came out in March of this year, based on SBA updating its research on NAICS codes and women-owned business participation in contracting. So some of them got WSB, some of them have EDWSB. Now, if you are an economically disadvantaged women-owned small business, you can actually go after anything that you see here on this slide. Because if you're EDWSB, you're also WSB. However, the reverse is not true. So businesses that are women-owned small business but not EDWSB, they can only go after the ones that are specifically marked WSB.
And just
they
so
can't go after.
And just so we're clear, so the EDWSB, economically disadvantaged. Now because there has been, if you own your home, there's an increase. Typically, everyone that I know that own their home, their value went up over the past couple of years. So you're saying they definitely pull out that equity, so it's not included in your total.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that adjustment, and that's exactly why that adjustment is made, because home property values go up, and also based on where you are in the country. Home values in California are going to be a lot different than they are here in Georgia. So that's the way to kind of take that out of the equation. Yeah. But this is where that distinction between economically disadvantaged WSB, which I would say, once again, I think 99.5+% of businesses probably fall under that. They can go after contracting opportunities classified as with NAICS codes classified for WSB. They can go after those, but the WSB certified firm cannot go after anything other than what is marked specifically WSB. So that's where that distinction come in. And when you apply, you would simply indicate, provide that you meet the criteria that's been mentioned, that you're EDWSB, and then you've taken care of both categories. But I'm gonna go back when we're done and look at transportation, because I'm sure there are some transportation ones on here. In terms of just kind of marketing, just some tips to keep in mind. And if when you do market research, you want to ultimately identify the buyers, and get to know them, because those are the people who are actually going to be deciding how procurements are done, if they're going to be full and open competition, or they're going to be set aside for a specific type of business, et cetera. And someone said something to me a few weeks ago in a presentation I was sitting in on, and it makes a lot of sense. A lot of times businesses want to go in and just do the spiel on, this is who I am and this is what I do. This person suggested, and it makes sense that I think about it, you really have a couple of conversations. The first conversation should be kind of a discovery conversation. Instead of jumping to, this is what we do and blah, 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 blah. Ask the potential buyer, the agency, what are some of their common needs in terms of what they're looking to purchase? What types of goods, what types of services, how often do they need them? How to get a feel for what it is, what their pain points are. Sometimes that's overused, but what is it that they really need help with in their acquisition? And what would make that easier? So do have that conversation first. Go back, figure out, can your business do that or make adaptations that make sense that would allow you to meet those needs? And then you look at doing that pitch about, this is what we can do, but it's in the context of, you've already told me what you need, so this is how I can help you meet the need, as opposed to, this is who we are and this is what we can do, blah, 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 and you're not even sure that's what they need. I was like, well, I mean, that makes sense, but I just never really thought of it that way. But that could be an approach. You identify the procedures that they use, because in the federal government, we had the Federal Acquisition Regulations, which is kind of the overarching how to do procurement. But a lot of times individual agencies have supplements to that in terms of how they specifically do their contracting work and opportunities, and put them out there and go about fulfilling their contracting obligations. And then there's stuff that's not written, that's just customary. And that's where a lot of times people are like, okay, I can see what the official process is. But, there's those other things that, okay, this is how they do it. They don't necessarily have it in writing, but this is kind of customarily how they work. And so kind of learning that, and that does take time to kind of figure out the unofficial as well as the official processes on how procurements are done in a particular agency. And then just once you kind of identify where you have the best fit in terms of what you offer and who's buying, then, you kind of prioritize your targets in terms of which agency or bureau, et cetera, that would be the most likely to give you a good return on your investment of effort and time and money.
And I want to say something, just because it's the federal government. So we put this overarching statement of the federal government. Every agency is different. Every agency has their own unique way of doing things. Just because, this small business specialist or this contract specialist wants this does not necessarily mean that you go to the next agency, they're going to want the same thing. So, and if you've spent time in the federal government, you know that they don't talk to each other. That is just the way things work. So just so we're clear on that, because I've seen many things online that I think is just not accurate. And if you have experience in that space, you'll understand that talking to organizations like the SBA or even GSA that deal with multiple agencies are always best. Because again, when you're talking to the contract specialist, what they identify as important or their process, it definitely changes depending on what that agency is.
Definitely, definitely. And then the final point here is, you're making contacts constantly. That's a constant process. And you can do that through small business events and other networking opportunities. A lot of time agencies have what they call industry days, where they go out. And I always, once again, at an event I was at a couple of weeks ago, someone asked the question of a contracting officer, what do you do when you get a resume or a capability statement from someone? And it's like, well, first of all, look to see, is this someone I've actually had a prior conversation with? And if not, then they didn't come out and say I throw it away, but I put it aside, which I hear as file 13, but maybe not. But they put it aside. So definitely look for those opportunities when they're coming out, because obviously they're in the mindset and mode at that point of reaching out to see what small businesses are out there and what they're offering and making those connections. So you definitely want to take advantage of those and then follow up with, whatever you agreed to follow up with that person at that time. And they're in the mindset of being receptive to it as opposed to a total cold call. Because what I gather is that does not really get as much bang for your buck as meeting with a contracting officer, because they affirmatively have gone out in an outreach mode to meet with small businesses. So just something to keep in mind.
Raise your hand or put in the chat if you were in attendance when we hosted and brought out GSA, which is Government Services Administration. They are by far the biggest, one of the biggest purchasers. They control a lot. They control a lot of the real estate. We brought them out probably about a year or so ago. I know it was before the pandemic. They had never come again on the South Side. Andrea, I know you were there. One of the things they said in addition to that too, which I found really interesting, is they really didn't like the self-certification. So even though people were self-certifying through SBA, their process, they just looked at them a little bit different if they self-certified. So I think this process now that Small Business Administration has will eliminate things like that, because they're a little more trustworthy of who is actually coming through the door to contract with them. So we only had one person that participated, okay, or that's on this call. But yeah, so we try to make sure we bring out different agencies, and it's been a while. Because again, the ability to talk to these contract officers and these small business specialists to see exactly what they want, as they're the ones who are writing the actual proposals, and they're actually the ones who are going to decide who they just, who they pick ultimately.
Yeah. It's got to work on that, because was it Chastity Ash that came out by any chance?
I think it was Chastity.
From GSA, yes. She's very good about trying to get out there rather than have people come to her. But that might be something to look at doing, bringing in some other agencies. One good thing about the Atlanta area is Atlanta is a regional hub for the Southeast region in the federal government. So we do have a lot of buying activities in Atlanta and even beyond, just in the state of Georgia. So that might be something we can discuss. How do we bring people in? Also, another thing, just put on our idea list is maybe larger, like prime contractors that might have subcontracting opportunities, or it could be prospective mentors. That might be something we can work towards.
There's some pretty big ones here in the area, but
we can work towards that.
Talking to primes, Yeah.
But one thing, and we do have some other folks at SBA, not in my office, but Office of Government Contracting, that work with the contracting activities on the front end as they're planning procurements, and also something similar with prime contractors. So we might could tap into that as well, and maybe have something based on what they see know will work or not work as businesses try to do outreach. So we'll wrap it up here, kind of get to the home stretch. Of course, with the WSB federal contracting program, we've already talked about either set aside or sole source contracting opportunities for firms that are certified. You can also leverage that certification to, once again, to build capacity and grow. And a couple of things you could do from a contracting standpoint. One, joint ventures. And a lot of time we think of contracting as one business prime contractor, but especially as contracting opportunities are getting larger, and that's a whole nother conversation in terms of some of the larger contracting vehicles that they're putting what would have been several contract opportunities under, because it's okay, need less administrative personnel to make that happen. That makes it harder for small businesses to be able to go after those larger contracts. So joint venturing is a possible way of addressing that. Joint venture doesn't have to be just two businesses. It could be, there's not, it's just more of a practical limit, because at some point you're going to have too many firms and it'll be too unwieldy. But, it's nothing to prevent you from having a 3 business or 4 business joint venture. And that way you bring together, you each have different skill sets, or you each have different resources that are needed for the whole contracting opportunity. And there are ways to make that work. And that's something we could explore at another time. And then also we have the SBA Small Business Mentor Protege Program, which allows small businesses that are new to procurement as proteges to work with more experienced businesses as mentors. And those can be small businesses that are more advanced and have more experience, or it could be large businesses. And the one thing about that program is that if you have an approved mentor protege agreement from our program, say you partner with a large business and a small business opportunity come up. It could be a Roseby contract, it could be HubZone, it could be 8A or a small disadvantaged business. You can joint venture with that large company and go after that contract. Normally you wouldn't be able to do that, because normally we add up everything when there's a joint venture. We add up all the revenues, or we add up all the employees. And if it's over the size standard, then it wouldn't be eligible. But this creates an exception that allows that joint venture with a large business to be able to qualify to pursue that small business related work. And the mentor can also provide other types of assistance. So obviously contracting, but also like technical assistance, operational assistance. You can even financial assistance, loans and equity. And I know of a couple of situations where we've actually had people, the mentor provide equity, inject equity in the company. So that's there as well. We also have, and of course, just a reference to some of the other things that I talked about earlier in terms of management, technical assistance, training that we can provide, the surety bond program, lending, etc. And just some additional resources in terms of federal market research. Once again, sam.gov. They have contract data, and you can research contracting based on NAICS codes, agency. You can slice and dice it just about however you want to kind of look at who's buying what. And then also contracting opportunities that are out, or market research questionnaires are published there as well. USAspending.gov offers a lot of information on contracting as well. I actually find it a little easier to use than sam.gov, but you can once again do queries on a variety of things you might want to look at in terms of determining how you want to focus your marketing efforts. Federal procurement forecast, very important. Just like companies have annual, say, reports, and maybe they forecast or strategic plans to kind of let you know this is what we're thinking about doing in the future. Federal government does that too. And you can go to acquisition.gov, go to federal agency procurement forecast, and it kind of tells you what their longer term plans are for procurement. That may give you some ideas of what's coming down the pike, and if there's something there maybe to follow up on or pursue. In terms of just assistance resources, one, if you've not worked with them, Georgia Tech Procurement Assistance Center. They have, I think, 7 around the state, including one in Atlanta, and that's their website there, gtpac.org. But they actually can help you with the market research. They have their bid match program where you complete a profile of all the things you do in kind of plain English. They translate them into the NAICS codes and all the other codes that the government uses to describe work and contracting opportunities. And then basically their system looks for contracting opportunities, not only in the federal government, but state and local government as well that subscribe. And if there's something that looks like, oh, that might be something your business could do, you'll get an email, kind of a lead. Here's something you might want to take a look at. So that I've had people tell me that's been very helpful and saves them a lot of time rather than them trying to figure it out themselves. And then just go to our website, SBA.gov, and go to the federal contracting tab. And then here are some of the resources that are available, and not only explaining the other certification programs we have, but our 7J Management Technical Assistance Program, which EDWSB is eligible to take advantage of, as well as 8A firms, small disadvantaged firms, firms in low-income areas, et cetera. And there's a variety of webinars and other counseling, virtual counseling that takes place on different aspects of contracting, market research, et cetera. Mentioned the Mentor Protege program, subcontracting opportunities. If you kind of want to know, have an idea of where to start to see where those might be, you might check out Subnet, which is on the SBA website, which is the subcontracting network. And basically it's a place where primes can place their subcontracting opportunities there. And then the Procurement Center Representatives and Commercial Marketing Representatives Directory. Those are the people I mentioned earlier that either work with the federal agencies in procurement planning or with the primes in terms of subcontracting planning. And we do have some of that, those individuals in the Georgia in our Office of Government Contracting downstairs. And this slide here is simply just kind of once you are certified WOSB or ED WOSB, basically what you need to do, you have to annually certify that you still meet the criteria. And then every 3 years, you actually have to do a complete recertification. And so those are the steps there that you would take to make that happen. And I think that is it. Do you have any other questions?
I did want to say, I want to be clear. Anybody's on this caller that registered, because we had little over 80 people that registered, and we only have I think our highest number got up to maybe 40. We will make sure that you get this information in addition to you. Yeah, in addition to your NAICS codes, the whole thing. Those who put in their email address, we want to make sure we streamline that process. If you were needing assistance We don't want to overwhelm, but we do need to make sure that we're keeping track and making sure that those who said they were having issues registering, that we're
Yeah.
definitely assisting in that space. In addition to that, when you are in the, let me back up. We offer a government contracting course. It's a couple of hours, but it's a working course. One of the things that I tell the ladies who come into that course is, once you're in the system, please make sure that, or let me back up. You will start getting emails and they will start to impersonate what it may be, like a sam.com. Make sure you're always looking for a .gov when you're going to these sites, because what tends to happen is, of course, your information then becomes public. We're able to see, that you're listed in the repository, I guess you can say. And so you will begin to get emails saying you got to certify through them. Just make sure you're filtering that out. I mean, we ignore them left and right, but one way to make sure you're on the right site is to make sure it has a .gov at the end, because it's very easy to get in that mess that starts to come your way. And again, if you guys have any further questions, I know we wanted to talk about, so did we mention over about the access to capital, or do we have anything else we needed to mention in that area? Do we have something else? I know we're at 11:39.
Yeah. I didn't have anything else. And that's something, we can revisit at another time if there's specific questions or needs. We could definitely do that. But basically just what I mentioned earlier in terms of how we generally operate on that regard. There's no direct lending at this point, except for when there's a natural disaster declaration. Our regular business loans is basically loan guarantees or microloan.
Okay. Yeah. So again, Terry mentioned the microloans typically done through the CDFIs. There are so many, but they're typically your middleman between your bank and what would you call it?
Micro lender. Yeah, the micro lender. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, the kind of that for businesses that they don't necessarily need a lot of money, like your micro entrepreneurs. Then that's what the niche they would fill, that up to 50. We have another program called Community Advantage, which is goes up to $350,000 loan, which we guarantee the loan like we would with a bank, except it's made by a mission-based lender, such as a community development financial institution or a micro lender. And so in our market, we have Access to Capital for Entrepreneur, or ACE, aceloans.org, and we have Lift Fund. liftfund.com, and they do microloans as well as that Community Advantage.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, I want to say that concludes. We are almost at the 12 o'clock hour. How do I know if you received our emails? Well, if you registered, we definitely got your emails, but we definitely jotted down some of the emails that you did put inside of the chat. But again, if you absolutely registered, which hopefully you did if you're on this call, then we definitely got that.
I'll go ahead and give them my email because I don't think they were able, I typed it in, but I don't think they were able to see it.
Okay.
It's Terry, T as in Tom, ERRI D as in David, ENISON at SBA.gov. So Terry.Dennison at SBA.gov. And I'll be sending you some documents here in the next couple hours or so, and the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. All right, guys. So again, thank you for joining us. This is Southern Crescent Women in Business in collaboration with the Small Business Administration. We're going to be doing a host of other trainings because although this is WOSB, as you have seen, you have 8A certification. You also have HubZone, which we didn't even touch on.
Each one of those could actually be their own training.
Absolutely. 8A definitely by itself.
Yeah.
But we just kind of want you guys to understand how the federal government does business. And please don't take yourself out of that category. If you're a veteran, we're definitely going to be working a little bit closer with our veterans because there are just tons of opportunities where veterans are concerned.
And one thing on that, just as a heads up, is people may have heard, VA had been doing, was it the CVE, Center for Verification of Eligibility? That function is going to be transferred to SBA. It's supposed to happen effective January 1st. I think there's some legislation to try to push that back, but at some point it's going to end up with SBA in doing
my question is, are we going to make sure those who are already certified are grandfathered in? Because, having partnered with a veteran in certifying multiple veteran-owned businesses, that process is not easy.
Yeah.
I think there is some, and I know Terry mentioned, and I'm not gonna hold y'all. What people don't realize is these certifications, although even if you don't want to do federal, okay, I know Coca-Cola, the Coca-Cola company, they accept veteran-owned certifications. They accept the WOSB certifications. Now, Coca-Cola is a little different because they sit at a round table with WeBank, but they still accept certifications. Okay, if you get those federal certifications, they're accepted there as well. So just kind of FYI in that space as well. But definitely, if you're a veteran, get plugged in. We want to do a little bit more with you because I don't think you guys are taking a lot of those opportunities that are available. It's a lot. All right, guys. So if there are no more questions, again, please make sure you stay plugged in to Southern Crescent Women in Business. Those who don't or didn't know what SBA is, hopefully you have more of a clearer picture. And thank you guys and have an amazing Monday.
Take care.
Bye-bye.